Everyone laughed the day she walked into boot camp. But by the end of that month, even the commander couldn't speak when he saw what was inked across her back. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Rain fell in sharp silver lines that morning as new recruits lined up on the asphalt. The air smelled of mud, sweat, and nervous energy. They stood in perfect rows, or tried to, their breaths visible in the cold air. And in the middle of it all stood Emma Lane. Her shoulders straight, her face calm, but her uniform too big, her boots too clean. She didn't look like the others, not the kind who could lift twice her weight or run 10 miles without breaking a sweat. The others whispered, called her Barbie behind her back, joked that she'd be gone before week 2. But she didn't react. She just stood there, still and silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Lane, barked Sergeant Weller, a man whose voice could probably crack steel. You think this is a spa? You move when I say move. Yes, Sergeant. She snapped back, her tone calm, unshaken. That calm irritated them even more. By the second week, the jokes turned into bets. How long before she quit? But she didn't. She ran through the mud, carried the same weight, took the same falls. And every time she hit the ground, she got up faster than before. Yet there was something about her that unsettled people. She didn't talk about her past, never mentioned her family, never laughed at their jokes. The only personal thing anyone ever saw was the faint shadow of a tattoo beneath her training shirt, just enough to see that it wasn't small. One night, during lights out, the whispers started again. Probably a butterfly or something. One of the recruits chuckled. Or maybe her boyfriend's name. Another sneered. Emma rolled over, her eyes open in the dark. She said nothing. But deep inside, her chest tightened, not from shame, but from memory. By the time the commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, came for inspection at the end of the month, everyone had something to prove. The morning was cold, the sky bruised with clouds. Hayes was a man of legend. 3 tours, dozens of commendations, and a stare that could silence a room. When he passed down the line, boots echoing against the concrete, every recruit stiffened. Until he stopped, right in front of Emma. Private Lane, he said, his voice low but sharp. Step forward. The air grew still. Even the wind seemed to wait. She stepped out of line, eyes locked on his. You've been quiet, he said. Too quiet. What's your story? Sir, no story, sir. She replied. He circled her once, measuring her stance, the scars on her hands, the discipline in her eyes. Then, suddenly, one of the recruits behind her snickered. Maybe she's just here for the free jacket, he muttered. Laughter rippled through the line. Silence. The sergeant barked, but the damage was done. The sound of mockery hung in the air like smoke. Hayes's jaw tightened. Lane, remove your jacket. A hush fell. Even the mocking recruits looked uncertain now. She hesitated only a moment, then unzipped her uniform jacket and peeled it off, revealing a plain gray t-shirt soaked through with rain. Further, he said quietly. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she obeyed, pulling the fabric up and over her head. And then, silence. Absolute, breathless silence. Across her back, from shoulder to shoulder, stretched a tattoo, an emblem, perfectly detailed, faded in some places but unmistakable. It was the insignia of the 9th Rescue Unit, a special task force that hadn't existed for years. Below it were names. 8 of them. Every name struck the commander like a bullet. He knew them. They were heroes, soldiers who died during a classified rescue mission in Kandahar years ago. He'd been there when the helicopter went down. He'd written the condolence letters himself, and right there, at the bottom of the tattoo, was a 9th name. Hayes, his name. The air felt electric. No one dared move. The recruits' mocking smirks faded into pure confusion. Where did you get that? He asked softly. Emma turned slowly, meeting his eyes. My father had it, before his last deployment. For a moment, Hayes looked like he'd seen a ghost. Your father? His voice faltered. Was Sergeant Daniel Lane? She nodded once. He saved 6 men that day. You were one of them. No one breathed. The same soldiers who mocked her now stood frozen, the weight of their mistakes sinking in. Emma continued, her voice steady. He used to tell me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about standing your ground even when everyone's against you. Hayes looked down, his throat tight. I remember him saying that. Then he did something no one expected. The commander, The man who never broke posture straightened his back and saluted her. Every recruit's jaw dropped. This soldier, Hayes said firmly, turning to the group, bears a legacy that saved my life. You do well to remember that before you ever judge someone again. The recruits looked down, shame written all over their faces. That night, no one laughed in the barracks. When Emma walked in, the room went quiet. Then, one by one, they stood and saluted her. No words, just respect. It wasn't about fear. It was acknowledgement. From that day forward, training changed. Emma didn't have to prove herself anymore, but she still did, every single day. She ran farther, pushed harder, lifted heavier. Not to silence them, but to honor the name inked on her skin. Even Hayes visited the training field sometimes, watching her from a distance. He saw in her the same determination her father once had. And one evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, Hayes walked up to her quietly. "You carry his spirit well," he said. She smiled faintly. "He carried you once. I guess I'm just returning the favor." Months later, on graduation day, Emma stood at attention with her platoon. The flag rippled behind them, sunlight cutting through the clouds. When her name was called, Hayes himself pinned the insignia on her uniform. There was a hush, then applause. As she stood on that platform, eyes glistening, she glanced upward, toward the sky her father never came back from. And in that moment, something inside her eased. Not because she'd proved them wrong, but because she'd lived up to the promise behind that tattoo. Honor the fallen by standing tall, because courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands steady when others expect it to fall, and sometimes what's inked on your skin isn't decoration. It's destiny. Thank you for listening to Emma's story. If it moved you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in her place and where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more true, powerful stories of resilience, courage, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive.